Financial plan? Check. A health plan? Check. But do you have a place plan for your second half of life? You should, and we'll share why the place that you live is critical to your aging journey. Welcome to Aging Unscripted, a podcast with a different perspective on aging. Here, we explore a wide range of topics aimed at celebrating, supporting, exploring, and honoring the aging journey. I'm Jill Vitale-Aussem, and I am privileged to serve as the president and CEO at Christian Living Communities, a nonprofit senior living and services organization based in Denver, Colorado. And in the studio with me today, we have Pam Sullivan. Pam is our Vice President of Communications and Philanthropy. And we're super excited. Joining us from Austin, Texas, we have Ryan Fredrick, and we are going to be talking today about why place matters so much throughout our whole life, but especially in the second half of our lives. So Ryan is the author of a great book called Right Place, Right Time, The Ultimate Guide to Choosing a Home for the Second Half of Life. Ryan has a lot of experience in the senior living field. He's been a board member, an investor, an operator, a consultant, and he even lived in a senior living community when he was in his 20s. I'm super jealous about that, actually.
That sounds amazing.
I know, doesn't it? Today, Ryan provides strategic consulting to senior living providers across the country. In addition, he's the founder and CEO of Here, the Home for Place Planning. Here provides content, courses, and coaching to help people find the best place to live for each stage of life. Thanks for joining us, Ryan.
Thanks, Ryan. Good to see you.
Yeah, my pleasure. Excited about this conversation.
Yes, we are too. Well, let's get right into it. How about that? And really talk about, what do we mean when we say place matters? Ryan, you want to kick us off with this?
Yeah, sure. Great to be with you, Jill and Pam, and so inspired by all the great work of Christian Living Communities. Place. Yeah, I think sometimes we tend to think about place as what we see on Zillow. And we see this fancy kitchen and, the man layer and all these different things. But place, it's so much, Jill, because you've got the physical dimensions of place, which is your four walls, your block, your neighborhood, your metropolitan area, region of the country, et cetera. That's all these physical dimensions that are much more than what Zillow might suggest when you visit the website. But more than that, it really is this foundation for what I describe as healthy longevity, where that place is physical, like we talked about, but it also shapes your social networks. It shapes your habits. So certain places will make it easier to be healthy. And also it is foundational for your financial well-being as well. And in a world where we're going to have more and more people living to 100 and beyond, financial well-being is going to be trickier for more people. And so how you calibrate all those things. So it's physically a place, but it actually is a foundation for your broader life.
Talk a little bit more about that foundational piece, because I've recently experienced this, and I think, Jill, you had a similar experience, but it really is more about who you're surrounding yourself with, who you see, what your environment is, and place can change throughout your life. Like the place I had when my children were little is so much different than the place I have now that I'm an empty nester. Talk a little bit about that surrounding, that sense of community, and what does that mean when you think about place?
Yeah, it's really interesting, Pam. You can have the same physical address, but how you relate to your place and your place can be dramatically different. I describe it sometimes like your location, maybe when you had kids younger, was like the perfect place, and now you have a new chapter, and it may not be the perfect place, or you might have to reinvent how you relate to that place. So I think that to your question, we get shaped by place more than we shape place. So we've got neighbors around us who are socially engaged, who know us, who care for us. We act as a true community. It's a lot easier to just plug into that and be part of that ethos than be in a spot where no one knows each other. There isn't a shared sense of responsibility to help, and expect that you're going to change the culture of those around you. So it is part of what we're describing is it's visible, but there's a lot of it's actually not visible that matters. Like, and sociologists will call it social cohesion. They'll call it social capital, both the bonding social capital, how close are you to those that are similar to you, but also bridging social capital. You know, what relationships do you have with those that are different than you? And some of that even could just be age. You know, do you have relationships with people that are of different generations?
Yeah. Right when Ryan's book came out, my husband and I were looking to buy a new house. And I was so drawn in by this new neighborhood that was being developed. And I was like, oh my gosh, I can get the kitchen, even though I don't cook very much. I still wanted the kitchen that I really wanted. And I was so like enthralled with the house, the structure of this home. And it was just so lucky that Ryan's book came out and I was reading his book. And I realized, oh my goodness, like that neighborhood was not designed for cohesion, right? Because you can see there's neighborhoods that are designed for privacy, and then there's neighborhoods that are designed for a combination of privacy and community. And further, I realized there weren't walking trails nearby. That is essential to my well-being. I would have been 15 minutes further away from my brother and his family, my dad, the place where I like to take art classes. And just reading that book made me say, you know what, whether or not I have the design of a kitchen I want is not going to impact my well-being, but being close to all those things and having trails I can walk on absolutely will. And we fortunately ended up in a neighborhood where we also have people who care about each other, right? I think about co-housing architect Chuck Durrett says you got to have somebody next door who gives a damn. And we have that now. And I think if I'd focused on just the house, we wouldn't have what we have right now.
Less worrying about the lawn and the amenities. Pay attention to what you're seeing when you go through the neighborhood. When you visit a senior living community, how are people talking to each other and addressing each other? That's what you need to pay attention to. The amenities are great. Don't get me wrong. They're important. Right. But it's more about the people, it sounds like.
Yeah. And then you get into it like, so I'm in my mid-50s and place matters. It mattered, like you said, Pam, when you're in your 20s and your 30s. And then as we get older too, I'm really interested to hear what you both think about this, with the whole idea that, and the messaging we get that you should age in place and stay in the home you've always lived in until the day you die. And that is kind of what a lot of people shoot for. But does aging in place always really serve people?
Ryan, what do you see in your experience in the research you've done?
So I just did this talk today to the Financial Planning Association of Austin, and there were a number of wealth advisors thinking about some of the stuff. So this is coming right off this conversation. And when I was asked this question, I said that in my observation, most times, or certainly numerous times, when people end up aging in place, it's not because they did all the homework and said, I thought about it, and the best possible version of my future self is by staying where I am. More often than not, it's because people haven't done the work and have the imagination to understand what gives me the best chances to thrive in this next chapter of life. Now, it doesn't mean you can't age and thrive in your current home. That certainly can happen. But especially as people are living longer, we just have more life chapters. And each life chapter is an opportunity to understand the risks and the upside of that chapter. And so I describe it's extraordinarily rare for a one location, one house to be the best place for you in your 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. Highly, highly unlikely. And by the way, it's not just a function of the design of the house, although that's clearly a factor in many cases. We have less than 4% of the housing stock is designed for people with some even limited mobility. It's a fact that, going back to your point, Pam, the people around you, like that changes too. So your friends move and social circles change. So I again, it's not that it can't work for some people, but I think in the most cases I've observed just people, they've missed an opportunity to really think about what's the best place for them in this next chapter. And the person they compromise potentially is not their current self, it's their future self.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about something that a lot of people don't think about. So you are in your home, you raise your family here, and you may be married, maybe have a spouse or a life partner, but there's maybe a time in life where you're aging on your own or become a solo ager. It's a term we've heard a lot about. There are different considerations for solo aging versus with a partner. And I really think about the person aging in place on their own, and
or without children, right? That'll be me when I get older. So it's a different journey.
It's a different journey. And that social connection, if you self-isolate too much in your home, that can lead to all kinds of problems like cognitive decline. What are your tips for people who need to really think that part of the journey may not be what they have in the next 5, 10, 15 years, but that's going to be a reality for them?
So one of the things I talk about in some of my presentations is, living longer is an outcome of our modern age. Living healthy longer is more of an outcome of our lifestyle decisions. And I think the more that the research is more widely understood and practiced, we can recognize that certain lifestyle habits in our 50s impact like the probability of healthy longevity down the road. And there's that macro study done years ago now that chronic loneliness has the health equivalent of smoking more than a pack of cigarettes a day. Now that got a lot of press. I would think what's happening more recently is people are saying, wait a second, yeah, we have this loneliness issue, but even just isolation, even if you're not lonely, like isolation can have consequences related to your well-being. And what's happening at the macro level is a lot of research has been published on this recently that as a society, we're becoming more self-isolated. Fewer people are going out, fewer people are joining clubs, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's making it hard to have some of these relationships. So I would say that this is really important. This conversation is really important for not just people in their 70s, but in their 60s, 50s, 40s, because just like Jill was saying earlier, we can be intentional about the place that we place ourselves. And then a number of these like lifestyle decisions become like easier. Like Jill was driving, it's easier to go for a hike if you got a trail close by.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And you look at the research around genetics, only up to 20% of our longevity is linked to our genetics. It's more about lifestyle and environment. So this
have more control over the quality of the longevity of your life if you start making those choices early.
Yeah. You do, but also, and recognizing that like each chapter allows you the opportunity to reset that decision. Okay, we love that time where we had a view over the mountains and we had a small, close group of friends. But now this next chapter, we want to, it should be different. Here's why. Like, it's okay to like revisit these things, revisit these dreams and imagine what the next chapter could look like.
I was thinking, Pam, I think mentioned this earlier, that all the research that shows that the way we live and the habits that we have are so influenced by people around us. Will you talk a little bit about that? I thought that was fascinating.
It is fascinating. So, and it's even your friend's friends. So if you're like, friends are happy, you're more likely to be happy. If your friends are depressed, you're more likely to be depressed. Now, this is not a suggestion you should unfriend your depressed friends. It's not what this is about. But
that makes them even more depressed, Ryan.
They're even more depressed. Exactly. But what it does though is a lot of these habits they're literally caught. Like, they are literally caught. So one way to think about it is if you're thinking about moving somewhere, either a different geography or maybe a different like physical dwelling community, look at the people that are there. Like, do you see yourself in the people that are there? Because you will, as much as you might hope to be, I'm going to be my own person. We get pulled in by like almost subconsciously to the behaviors. Like here in Austin, Texas, I was joking about this the other day, like way more breakfast tacos than I did when I was in Baltimore. And that's good. It's it happens, it happens. So, but that can happen in much more micro ways. So just kind of observe the people. Do I see myself in these people in some fashion? Because odds are you might start to conform to the lifestyle that you're.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
And I think the social connection thing is huge too. I have this conversation on a regular basis with my mom. She is living on her own. And she has made the measurement of when it's time for her to change place if she cannot get to her social engagements. So she's very purposefully, intentionally volunteers a certain amount each week. She has lunch with her friends a certain amount each week, but it's all dependent on her driving. So if she is no longer able to keep those connections, then that's her measurement of when place needs to change. So we've had those conversations probably because I work in senior living, but there's a lot of people who, how do you start that conversation as an adult child with your aging parent?
Well, you could do what I did and be a helicopter daughter. Jill? In the end, my parents appreciated it. But it is right. People make their own decisions. But yeah, how do you help people to start to see those different aspects of place and like your mom? That's a great measure.
She's been to a lot of CLC events over the years. So I think we influenced her thinking process. But Ryan, what are you saying? What would you say to an adult child?
Well, Jill, I think you must be the friendliest helicopter. So this is a really important conversation because part of it's trying to change the narrative. And actually, see, that's part of the reason I came up with the term place planning was that there's something about place planning that I believe is probably emotional neutral. Place planning is not, okay, let's find a place for mom. Place planning isn't, oh gosh, let's think about the last child. Place planning, it's a broader construct. Like, place matters in my life. Where do I want place to be in my current and next chapter? And so I think there's an opportunity at the broader narrative to just have these conversations about a recognition that this variable has an outsized impact on our life. And back to your question, how do we encourage, say, our parents or people in their 70s, 80s to think about this more proactively? I think it's a few things. One, I think it'd be helpful for them, all of us, to see where place doesn't work for people. They're like, oh, you know what? They didn't think about that, and here's what the outcome looks like. And then some of it is also, Pam, there's like slight gradations. Like with your mom, it's not just her getting out to her social engagements. It's even some of her friends getting the social engagements. So I think there's a piece of this as well, which is to say, really encourage people to be thoughtful, but also be kind of loose-handed, meaning the winds could blow differently tomorrow. And I should recognize that I might have a new reality tomorrow, and how do I plan for that and optimize around that? But it is a very emotional decision. While Jill, certainly is a very friendly helicopter daughter. Not every parent is going to warm up to that reception.
Right.
I wrote the book in such a way that you could give it to someone, to give it to your parents, and without saying, hey, go get your act together, but just have them to make them just process on their own. The book is now turned into courses, self-guided, facilitated, other content. So there's multiple ways for people to get kind of noodling and ruminating on some of these thoughts.
And Ryan, the work that you're doing is so important because these classes that you're doing are helping people to think differently and plan differently. And the more we can get this into the conversation, the better decisions people will make. I had some older relatives that I didn't want to leave their home and they ended up prisoners in their own home, right? Because you can't drive at night anymore. Your friends move away. Everything changes. And I think the more we can all do to get the word out and like share your book with people really matters. I always try to tell people especially when they're thinking about senior living or whatever it might be. I want to move to a different community setting. They say, well, I'm not ready yet. And I always say to folks, if you wait till you're ready, it's too late.
It is too late.
And then you're in a crisis and then you don't get the chance to make these decisions. So thank you for the work that you're doing, Ryan. And I want to hear a little bit too, Pam and I, we've been in this field a long time and we love this aging services field. And Ryan, and I know you've been in this field a long time too. What shifts do you think we all need to make as operators, providers, and senior living to help people on the aging journey and have it be a place that people see as a place they want to be to live their best life?
Yeah. In some cases, Jill, when we hear I'm not ready yet, that can be, as you point out, part of the emotional state, psychological state of an individual or a couple. But also can be that it's a response to what the options are. Like, I'm not ready for that.
Right. Well, it's also the preconceived notion. I mean, what people grew up with, right? So
yes.
The nursing home of the 50s is not the nursing home of today, but that's what their brain still goes.
Right. Or senior living that's very institutional, right? And people are telling you what to do. That doesn't work.
Right. Yeah. Well, and this is where, your book is so critical in this and disrupting the status quo for senior living, because one of the things you do so brilliantly, Jill, is you elevate this role of a citizen and to say, hey, you've always been a citizen. Why should it be any different when you move into a quote unquote retirement community? And I think that's a key piece as we look going forward. I think that there is a tremendous opportunity. It won't be easy, but a tremendous opportunity to focus less on senior living and focusing more on creating great places for people to thrive in the second half of life. And that orientation is critical because it allows you to think about like models that are different than how it's done today. It allows you to think, well, wait a second, what if we build condos in a certain scale? We built in community and technology, but maybe it's not even age restricted, but we've done it in such a way that we kind of help formulate organic community. And as we know, healthcare is shifting. So it's less about going to healthcare. It's about coming to you. It's less about being reactive over time. It's more about being proactive. So as the world around us changes, as consumers are expecting more, as they're looking for less of a delineation of this was me before and this is me after quote unquote senior living, those are all tremendous opportunities for, providers, I would say especially mission-based providers, to dig in, like how can we have even greater impact for the next chapter. So I see it as being a reorientation, Jill. I have a presentation I've done where I map out the number of people. It's 23 million people, 75 and older. And that's blue. And I put a little red dot, which is the size of the senior living industry. And it literally is like, it's a pimple on this big thing. And so it speaks to, there's so much of an opportunity to not only improve the better.
What's the call to action? We have to pimple.
Pimple. Hey, we got some acne. But more than that, how can we find a way to think about all the ways in which people aren't being met today, and even more importantly, tomorrow? And use places, this lever. We know places, this huge outsized impact, but it's great places.
Thank you, Ryan. And so I want to encourage everybody out there listening to pick up Ryan's book, Right Place, Right Time, The Ultimate Guide to Choosing a Home for the Second Half of Life. It doesn't matter what age you are. This book will help you. And Ryan, thank you so much for being here with us today. Hopefully we brought up some good food for thought for everyone who's joining us. We're all on this aging journey. We will have a link to Ryan's book and his website, which also has great resources in our podcast notes. And we appreciate everybody joining us today for Aging Unscripted, a reminder that aging is indeed unscripted. There are no rules, and everyone has a journey that's as individual as we are. Aging is a gift that not everyone receives. Elderhood is a sacred phase of life, that should be honored and celebrated. Thank you all so much for being with us.